am someone who doesn't like horror games. This is partly due to the fact that I get scared pretty easily by these kinds of monster creations. Not to say I'm scared of a lot of things, but after seeing it in theaters, I felt uncomfortable to say the least. But that's besides the point. The bigger, more important reason I don't like horror games that much is because they are usually attached to stories and gameplay I find uninteresting. Take the Resident Evil series, which I have a ton of respect for, but I simply have no interest in experiencing that world for myself. However, I do understand horror games. I understand the appeal. Fear is such a strong and easily accessed emotion for so many that horror games can be some of the most engaging experiences. People can also feel a certain sense of pride in completing a horror game, because so many don't have the stomach to do so. I'll bring up Dark Souls now, as I do in all my videos somehow, because it's so universally relevant. Dark Souls is a game that absorbs so many players. Rarely do you hear a player that just felt meh on the experience. It's always a love or hate relationship. Its world is so absorbing, and as I write the script now, I realize that most great experiences are absorbing because of how little you can know about the world. Let me explain. A game like Mario is very clear and obvious about what you can do. Even in a bigger game like Odyssey, it doesn't take a lot of work for players to see everything it has to offer. Now, the obvious contrast to games like Dark Souls is abundantly clear, as the game's world is just so big. I haven't seen everything in Dark Souls for myself, and yet when I first played it, it was always on my mind. At work or in my dreams, I would always be thinking about the world. I think the reason we can so easily lose ourselves in these kinds of experiences is because they are a reflection of real life. In life, we won't see everything the world has to offer. I can guarantee you won't. That makes everything we do more unique and special to ourselves, but it also makes us feel lost, perhaps alone, and small. Which finally lets me segue back to what this video is truly about. Little Nightmares 2. A game that I loved despite the horror genre label, and a game that truly does make you feel small, with no open world to speak of. A game that on the surface level feels very similar to the likes of Limbo and Inside, but a game... Actually, never mind. I'll stop trying to be profound now at the cost of any sensical analysis. In this video, I want to really take a look at the way Little Nightmares 2 tells its story, and how that story makes the player feel. From this point on, I have to warn you that I'll be spoiling Little Nightmares 2 entirely, as well as some aspects of the original game. I'm not going to say experiencing Little Nightmares 2 is at its best when playing yourself, but if that is something you ever intend on doing, I suggest adding this to your watch later and moving on for now. Little Nightmares 2 feels like a very traditional sequel in the way that it feels and plays like a bigger, and at least in my opinion, better version of the first game. There are scarier monsters, and more of them. The setting is more open and intimidating. There are more different types of gameplay that build off what the first game made, etc., etc., and it works to make a good experience even on the surface level. I talked more about how Little Nightmares 2 creates fear before, so you can click the link to see that as well. But this video is about the story, so let's talk about the ending. Mono makes his way into the Signal Tower, where he sees a giant and distorted Six. This is a visual surprise that I'd say most people enjoyed. It only feels right to save her one last time before the story ends. Except Little Nightmares 2 doesn't have the conclusion many thought it would. Six ends up dropping Mono after all he did for her. We see Mono abandoned in the Signal Tower as he eventually grows to become the Thin Man. These reveals are big visual changes and are exciting. Let's backpedal a bit to see why they work well. Little Nightmares is actually all about the visual reveals. The audio keeps the tension throughout the stages, but it's all done to make the monster reveal feel important and special. Take for instance the teacher, who we hear smacking her ruler down and slithering with her neck in the shadows before we finally arrive at the classroom. At a previous point in time, I might have criticized how the tension drops once the monsters come on screen, making what was previously an unknown threat left to your imagination known. But now I realize these visual reveals are the player's reward for making it that far. In the Hunter's Forest, you find a bag of bodies, and as you make your way through the house, you finally get to the shed to see who or what is behind what you saw. so it only makes sense that the final moments of the game have the biggest and most interesting visual reveals. They are meant to be your reward for beating the game. It's just good game design. However, this is still only a surface level interpretation of the story that is being told. What I'm about to say may seem completely irrelevant, but trust me, we'll circle back. So recently I've been watching a lot of Joseph Anderson's videos. He says a lot of smart stuff and is not afraid to be honest with his opinions. Even though I don't always agree with him, I respect him. I'll leave the channel link in the description, but anyways. I was watching his video on The Witness, where he talked about games having 4 different types of stories. These were a simple story told in a simple way, a simple story told in a complex way, a complex story told in a simple way, and a complex story told in a complex way. I think an argument could be made for Little Nightmares to fit in a few of these categories, and I was thinking about this as I watched Anderson's videos on Little Nightmares and Inside. Despite being similar games, he said he enjoyed Little Nightmares but didn't enjoy Inside. And after taking some time to think about it, I think I know why. The way Little Nightmares presents its story, it's as if the game is telling multiple stories. Let me explain. Little Nightmares 2 can be a game about 2 kids trying to save a monster-filled world. The levels and the gameplay tell that story. They overcome obstacles and grow a relationship with each other, only for Mono to fall as a tragic sacrifice to the cause and for them to fail. The visual reveals are still rewarding, and the Thin Man equals Mono reveal might even get a player to come back for another more in-depth playthrough, or at least get them thinking for a while after completion. That's a valid way to experience the story, and it's a simple story told in a simple way, with some horror elements. However, you could also hop over to the complete opposite end of the spectrum and read into the complex story told with subtle details and settings. Take these paintings on the wall, for example. They mean something in this complex story, and they add to the deeper narrative. Any player can see that Mono becomes Thin Man, but only the players reading into that complex story would know what that means and why that happens. This isn't to say that the complex story is the definitive story, but rather it's just another story that's there for different types of players to enjoy. I'm also not saying that Little Nightmares 2 is an empty shell story that players have to interpret. I'm actually saying that there are multiple written stories for this game. This is different compared to Inside, where you play one linear adventure that is meant to be a reflection of whatever the player relates to it. In Little Nightmares 2, a player can read the simple story, and it will make sense. But they can also read the complex story, and it will also make sense. Let's talk about Dark Souls again, and why that was actually a relevant comment on my part earlier. Like Dark Souls, the Little Nightmares series provides definitive answers to questions. The only thing is that these answers are hard to find. That's where the comparison to real life comes from. Not just the unknown, but specifically the unknown that can be known if you want to invest the time. An example would be an illusory wall that hides a secret area, or hidden connections between these eye symbols. The fact that these things are here makes the worlds feel more full. I'm reminded about the story of the City Mouse. His justification for living in the city is that he feels like things are happening there. Same thing with these absorbing games. You feel like things are happening around you, if not specifically to you, which is memorable. A little off topic now, but I wanted to mention the importance of other games to this feeling. Both Little Nightmares and the Dark Souls series have 3 installments. However, these games are never set one after the other. Dark Souls 2 isn't a direct sequel to Dark Souls, but rather it exists in the same world at a different place and time. This makes it so new players can enter the world at any point and explore in whatever order they like. Remembering back to history class, you didn't start learning at the beginning of time and slowly progressed into the present day. You learned through key events in history that had significance to the way the world was made, and you branch out from there. Playing a game in these franchises is like learning about a new piece of history. It adds context to your accumulated knowledge of the world, and all the stories give context to each other. So at the beginning of this video, I said that I didn't like horror games. That still holds true, because I don't find myself absorbed into their world most of the time. I also said that fear is an easy target for developers trying to make a memorable experience, but a full world and gameplay, but way more importantly story, can leave an impression that lasts far longer. Little Nightmares is a game that tells a layered story, but it also tells a simple story. and I don't see that done, or at the very least, done well, that often. Little Nightmares is likely named as such for having a little character in a nightmarish world, but it has memorable moments, like Mono's transformation to Thin Man or Six's deadly deed, that stand to be little nightmares that stay with you. A memory, or more fittingly a nightmare, to wake you up once in a while to see the world differently, just as any good nightmare should.